No. Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started with the November 10th Planning Commission meeting. Roll call. Commissioner member Hennis is here. Commissioner member Hines is not. Mr. Lucas is here. Mr. Whitmore is here. Mr. McLaughlin is here. Okay, so please take notice. Bear with me as I have to read these. Please take notice that the November 10th 2021 Planning Commission meeting will be held by electronic means pursuant of the continuity of government ordinance effective on October 6, 2021 due to the threats posed by COVID-19 pandemic to the health, safety, and welfare of the public. While some commission members may participate remotely, staff will be presenting normally in the Board of Supervisors meeting room at 150 South Main Street, Lexington 24450. In addition to citizens attending the meeting in person, citizens have several options to view or to participate in the Zoom meeting webinar as described below. We'll do our best to take citizen comments remotely. There are two options for citizens to offer comment. One, to join the Rockbridge County Planning Commission Zoom webinar. The link is available on the county website to copy into the address line on your browser. Or to join by telephone, you may dial into one of the numbers listed on the county website. The webinar ID and password are there for your convenience. Citizens wishing to simply view the meeting live or after the fact can do so on the Rockbridge County Planning Commission YouTube channel, also available on the county website. If you wish to make a citizen comment as a Zoom meeting participant, you will use the raise your hand feature, and you can press the raise hand button on the bottom of your Zoom window or press *9 if you are calling by telephone. This time we'll move on with the meeting. First of all, we will open up to citizen comments of anything not on tonight's agenda. Staff, do we have anyone physically present to speak?
Yes, first up is Mr. Stephen Hart.
Good evening. I'm Steve Hart from Cars Creek. I've given to Mr. Slade and asked him to pass on to you a proposal that I have to amend the definition, the county's definition of cottage industry, to expand it from merely the occupant to include the occupant's family. I believe this is necessary because of the county's provision for family subdivisions. If you execute one provision, the family subdivision, you can then find yourself at odds with the cottage industry provision. I think both of these are necessary for the economic growth of our community and for the development of family and community-based businesses. I hope that you will read this proposal, and I'm asking you to place this on next month's agenda so that we can actually have a discussion. I know we don't have discussions in community or in citizen comments, but I would like to discuss this at next month's meeting. And I also know that I don't have all the answers to this, and I don't have all the concerns. And it's through that process that we're able to bring this out. I've given you the proposal. My contact information is there, email and phone number, and I'm happy to speak to you about this anytime between now and then. And I certainly hope to see you again next month to actually discuss this. And I can either do the presentation myself, or you can ask Mr. Sladen to do it. He and I have been talking for this probably about 6 months, and I want to get it taken care of so it doesn't drag on and on forever.
Right.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Okay. Do we have any other?
Yes,
physically
next
present?
up is Stephen Cantor.
Good evening. Thanks for the privilege of letting me speak. My name is Stephen Cater, and I live on Mackey's Lane in the South River District. And I'm speaking about my concerns with the special exception permit request for Echo Adesso for a special events venue. When you drive down Mackey's Lane into Spring Valley, you don't think this would be a great place for a special events venue. There's farms, there's a few houses sprinkled on the hillsides. It's a place where people go for peace and quiet. It's a place where if you're thinking about opening a business, you might think, I could build a cabin here and have a B&B. I could plant an orchard and have a roadside fruit stand. It's a lovely setting, and it's an agricultural community. And you don't think that this would be a place where you would have an events venue for hundreds of people to come, once or twice a week down these tiny roads. Our biggest concern is, first of all, we live about a little over a mile from where Echo Adesso is. And I've been there. It's a beautiful facility. But it's to get there, you have to go down Mackey's Lane or Borden Grant Trail. Those are very narrow, windy, hilly, lots of blind turns and blind entrances and blind hills. And we have close calls about once a week when we drive around the neighborhood. People coming too fast, people in big vehicles, semi-trailers, large tractors. So I would like to see some mitigation plan for that if this request is approved. Putting up speed limit signs would help. Currently, it's a 55-mile-an-hour default state speed limit there, which is a little bit crazy for those little roads. The other concern is the light pollution that might occur. And I'd like to see some specifics about how many lights would be allowed, what the spectral content of the light that they would be allowed to use. We really like our dark skies in that area. A lot of us are amateur astronomers. And those are the substance of my concerns. I did write a letter to Mr. Sladen. I think he distributed that to you all. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cantor. All right, is there anyone else physically present? Chris, I know you had one other comment that was written.
I do. And this is pertaining to the proposed zoning text amendment for the Art Center. And so this is from Mr. James Panabaker. Bear with me here. So Mr. Panabaker wrote into the citizen comment period. He said, "Dear members of the Rockbridge County Planning Commission, I would like to express my support for Mr. Sladen's proposed zoning ordinance text amendments changing regarding the definitions of quote, cultural art and cultural art center and cultural music center. These changes would help move Rockbridge County forward as a cultural friendly for arts and crafts as well as music. To avoid confusion, I think it may be advisable to change references to the related special exceptions in 603.03-18 and 603B-03-13, which currently refer to cultural music centers. For example, you could change them to either 603.03-18, cultural art or cultural music center, 603B.03-13, cultural art center or music center, or to 603.18, cultural art center, 603.03-18A, cultural music center, and the same for the 13 and 13A, just making the distinction between the two. But though he also says, here's Mr. Sladen's proposed zoning text amendments, and that is the same information that is provided in your package. He ends and says, thank you very much for this opportunity to comment. And again, that is from James Panabaker, 445 Arnold Valley Road.
Okay, is there anybody?
Let's see. So
Hands raised.
that is all the written comments we received. We are emailed comments. There are no open question and answers. If any of the attendees would like to raise their hand and make a citizen comment, now is the appropriate time to do so. Not seeing any hands raised. Going back to the chat, there are no live chats and no open questions. With that, I'll turn the floor back over to the chair.
Okay, we'll go ahead and close the citizen comments at this point. Go on to the approval of the October 13th minutes.
Chairman, do we need to add, we were going to add to the December, that discussion that was brought up? From
For
Stephen.
Mr. Hart.
For Mr. Hart.
Mr. Hart, yeah.
Yes, I think if you would, staff, if you would go ahead and
add that.
Add it for
Add
discussion.
it for discussion for
Sure.
the next meeting.
Just
No.
didn't want
Absolutely.
that to get biased.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hennis.
Mhm.
Okay, minutes, motion and approval.
Make a motion that we approve the minutes as submitted.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Board of Supervisor report from staff.
Yes, at the October 25th, 2021 meeting, the Board of Supervisors had 3 public hearings. And they include Autumn Ridge LLC off of Old Farm Road. They approved that with the draft conditions as recommended by the Planning Commission. Then we had 2 different projects on Thoroughbred Circle. The first one was JB&LN Investments LLC. That was approved. That was a rezoning, a proper amendment, and that was approved by the board per your recommendation. And the second one in that area, again, off the Thoroughbred Circle, was AKB Development LLC, and that was also approved per the Planning Commission's recommendation. That's all I had to report.
Okay, good. Moving on next to on our agenda, the Randy Hoster Excavation LLC site plan review.
Yes, I had a very brief PowerPoint presentation, I believe, until sent, and at that time, I'll turn it over to Russ Orson, the engineer on the project. So this is agenda item number 5, Randy Hostetter Excavation LLC located at 296 Greenhouse Road. It's an application for a commercial site plan review in the general industrial zoning district. That's the I-1 zoning district. Again, the property is located at 296 Greenhouse Road. It's formerly the Schwann's Building, identified as tax map number 61-A-72A, and is located in the I-1 district, surrounded by the B1 and partially by AT. It's 2 acres on the nose per tax records, and currently 1 building and parking approximately 1 acre of the existing facility. The proposed expansion plans include I believe it's a 60 by 70 square foot of building addition, to the north side of the existing former Schwann's building. That's a total of 4,200 square foot addition. And then a second freestanding building, or a freestanding building to the northern property line that I believe is 40 foot by 160, and that math should work out to 4,600 square feet. As a pole building for storage. The buildings will be used for storage and maintenance of equipment. With that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. Russ Orson to review the additional details of the site plan and answer any questions that the Planning Commission may have.
Thanks, Chris. There are a few additional details that sums up the project. We're happy to help Randy utilize this site. I think it's perfect for him. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Straightforward.
All
Very straightforward.
ordinances and everything have been met. All,
That's correct. Yes, sir.
any other discussion? Questions from Mr. Orson? Okay, call for question.
I make a motion that the RHH Land LLC site plan for a 4,200 square foot building addition and a 6,400 square foot whole building at 296 Greenhouse Road, identified as tax map 61-A-72A in the I-1 zoning district, be approved.
Motion
I'll second.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And moving on now to Echo Adesso, the application for special exception permit to operate special events venue in the agriculture and general uses A2 zoning district.
Yes, and I have another brief PowerPoint presentation, so bear with me here. All right, this is a continued review of the Echo Adesso special exception permit to operate a special event venue in the agricultural and general use district. Again, this was the public hearing was held in the October meeting, but the Planning Commission postponed taking action, and so therefore it was put back on the this evening's November 10th, 2021's agenda. The property located on east side of Bourne Grant Trail, tax map number 64-15-B and 64-15-B1. This is reiterate some of the information from last year for the public and for the planning commission. The property is owned by 5C Business Development Innovations LLC and combined total of 143.203 acres per tax record. Those two tax parcels are highlighted in orange on the screen here. 5C Business Development Innovations LLC also owns additional acreage to the east that consists of 188.877 acres per tax records. The additional acreage to the east is under open space conservation, open space easement with the Virginia Outdoor Foundation, VOF. The total acreage between the subject parcels that are under consideration and the additional land that 5C and Business Development Innovation owns, the total acreage for all parcels in the area is 322.09 acres per tax records. Property is currently being utilized as a farm winery. Michael and Sierra Weatherly, a little bit about the special exception application itself. Michael and Sierra Weatherly have made an application for a special exception to operate a special event venue in the agricultural and general use districts. That's the A2 zoning district. Per section 603.03-24 of the County of Rockbridge Land Development Regulations, special events are a use by special exception in the A2 zoning district. Applicants are currently building an open air pavilion. And actually, last time Mr. Lucas and I were there, it was about completed. I think they were working on the stone chimneys on both sides of it. This is a picture here of it when it was in under construction, obviously. The permit would not restrict events to the pavilion itself. So at the October 13th, 2021 meeting, the Planning Commission held its public hearing and postponed taking action on the application. Since that time, staff and the district representative for the South River District met with Mr. Weatherly on site and reviewed the draft conditions. It's my understanding that Mr. Weatherly also met with a group of citizens and discussed the project and draft conditions. For discussion purposes, staff has modified these draft conditions, include the outcome of some of those discussions. And I'd just like to briefly go over it before I turn the floor over to Dr. Michael Weatherly. Number one, the vineyard tasting rooms operations shall be closed, not open to the public during special events. Number two, the permit is limited to no more than 52 special events per year. Number three, substantial compliance with concept plan prepared by applicant titled schematic plan showing parking and proposed venue at Echo Addendum Vineyards. Number four, events will be limited to a maximum of 250 attendees with no more than 125 vehicles on site for events. Number five, all site activities will be concluded by 9 p.m. on weekdays and 10 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. There are some I'd like to talk about if Planning Commission is willing. I'd like to talk about that condition from some slight modifications for clarification purposes. Moving along, number six, adequate off-street parking facilities and traffic controls will be provided. No parking along Bourne Grant Trail. Bourne Grant Trail is further identified as Route 706. Number seven, no alcoholic beverages. Alcoholic beverages will not be self-served. Number eight, all trash shall be taken directly to landfill and not collection centers or county green boxes. Number nine, any amplified music must be within an enclosed structure. Number 10, all the lighting shall be in compliance with 1303 of the County of Rockbridge Land Development Regulations. Number four, no aerial fireworks or gun salutes shall be permitted. No open air fires shall be permitted by the attendees. And lastly, number 12, approval contingent on county building department approval, Virginia Department of Transportation, and Health Department approvals. With that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Dr. Weatherly and his wife, Sierra. And they'll stop sharing and turn the floor over to them. I do have your PowerPoint, yes. They also have a free PowerPoint as well. I'm going to share my screen. Fortunately, I got a lot of windows open. Bear with me here. All right.
Hi. Good to see you all again. We'll try to be as brief as possible. Thank you for having us back. So the addendum, we just have a couple slides to go over here. This is serves as additional information, as mentioned from the last meeting. The day before we had the last meeting, we were given the provisions 1 through 11, which Mr. Slayton just went over, and those have since been altered. And like Mr. Slayton mentioned, we've obviously met with our neighbors since then. I guess at a high level summary, the last bullet there, we're asking for a lower and finite number of guests and events as compared to previously approved SEPs. You'll see that in a minute. Where blanks were originally provided in the last meeting, because that was kind of the stem of a lot of discussion. We since met with Mr. Lucas, Mr. Slayton, and some of our neighbors, which we'll go over in a minute. We've also taken the time to fill those blanks in, and we accentuated those in bold and underlined below, which Mr. Slayton just went over. So those are highlighted, and Mr. Slayton just went over them. The permit will be limited to no more than 52 events, weddings per year. We just said on average 1 a week. That's how we got to that math. And obviously during the winter months, there's probably not going to be a lot of weddings, so it'll be less than that. We filled in the blanks on the maximum number of attendees and the number of vehicles, obviously being closed when we have events. The winery will be closed. In regards to the traffic, the gentleman that spoke earlier, that would be about the same amount of traffic we get already when the winery is open anyway, so nothing would really change there. In meeting with our neighbors, they requested that we don't have events on Sundays, so we won't allow weddings on Sundays. The provision before said 11 p.m., so we crossed that out, as you see here, and made it 10 p.m., so ending a little earlier on Fridays and Saturdays. And then if we do have a wedding on the weekend, it would be 9 p.m. It's not listed here, but I think we went over it previously that all the part of the wedding package will be you have to book all the properties on site. So it'll also help cut down on the traffic. And Mr. Slayton obviously went over all these, so we're not going to read them again. Just a real quick look for comparison into other previously approved SEPs. Seclusion, Big String Farm, I mean, everyone knows all these names, obviously. 300, 300, 300. We're asking for less than most, and obviously Wade's Mill, the same as them, and Whistle Hollow, which isn't too far down the road. Yeah. So a little bit more than them, but less than others that have been approved. We'll be the first in the county, as far as we know, to actually put a limit on the number of events. Everyone else has been approved for an unlimited amount of events, and we're actually limiting ourselves. Also, too, by putting in the day and the time bounds, we're also creating additional restraints on ourselves. Just quick admin notes, change Mountain View to Mountain View Farm Products, and then replacing that Rockbridge with Lexington Valley, just an admin error there in the previous proposal that we submitted. And then, as Mr. Slayton said, coming out of the last meeting, we took some time to go meet with a lot of the neighbors that were here in the room and who got up and spoke, and we had a nice discussion. And from that meeting, we created some additional constraints on ourselves. We talked to Mr. Slayton, and I don't know how it goes as far as like putting provisions in, but just real quick to run down the list. Amplified music will be within an enclosed structure only. Obviously, that was already one of the requirements. Like I mentioned, an earlier end time for Monday through Thursday at 9 p.m. and then 10 p.m. on Friday and Saturdays. Almost everybody else's goes to 11. So again, bringing the time back and making it shorter than what everyone else has. The maximum number of guests and vehicles, having traffic control in the form of valets, flaggers, parking attendants for the event, allowing the maximum number of events. In regards to the comment about the night sky, we talked about installing night sky compliant lighting as per the International Dark Sky Association guidelines. This is again something that the neighbors requested. So making sure that we have low light, not commercial lighting. To light the footways at the end of the day to get to the parking lot, which is now completed. And yes, the pavilion is almost done. Owners will install and maintain a stop sign at the intersection at the end of the driveway, and also put in signs requesting that vehicles exit carefully. So signs leading out of the property to tell people to slow down, and then a stop sign there as you exit on the Borden Grant Trail. Adding additional landscaping around the pavilion to help, as in the form of trees, to help with the noise. We said in the last meeting, but just this is here again, having an event manager. As soon as we get approved, we're going to put out a job rec to try to get an event manager. That event manager will have to be on site at all times during the event. The people who are having the weddings also will have to have their event manager or wedding planner to work with our event manager. And obviously, our own staff is going to be on site for the entirety of the wedding. And then we talked about having open communication with the neighbors in the form of like a schedule or a calendar that we could put out there with the wedding, how many guests, and, have that as like public available information so that we can just make sure we're keeping the lines of communication open. And that's it. So again, very short, quicker than last time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
I applaud you for getting in with your neighbors and inviting them.
I have a question about the 52 events a year. So obviously that means you could have one every day of the week in June, except for Sundays, right? I mean, I know, well, I'm just thinking, wow, so there wasn't any talk about putting a cap on like a per month, it's just
I guess
52
we
is the
could do
total.
the math and do whatever that is.
Yeah, I
per
mean,
month,
obviously you're going to
too.
have more events in June and
Right.
July and August than you're going to have in December, January.
Yeah, I mean,
February.
like we talked about last time, we want to start slow and probably only do like 2 a month and then ramp up, but no more than 1 a week. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what
again,
we're.
We're not trying to be.
Right.
That's not us, because the draw to our property is people to experience agritourism. Agritourism is coming out in the farm, hiking our trails. They can go to the vineyard, we want to see the night sky. We're not trying to have it some crazy festival situation. We want people to, so if we have weddings or concerts, it's going to take away from that.
Well, and you're not going to be able to have the winery part open
Exactly.
either, so.
Exactly. So there's a good balance there. We
Mhm.
want to try to keep it.
And some of these things, Chris, that they had on their list are not included in our list here, like the traffic control, the event manager, the landscaping. Are those things we need to add in?
Some of those, I've talked to Dr. Weatherly and some of the citizens in the area, and some of those would be, in my opinion, some of those would be appropriate, but some of them would definitely need to be flushed out. Some of them are covered under the current exception. Some of them would certainly need to be flushed out. And I recall number 10, I would just not recommend. It's unenforceable as far as the communication with neighbors, open lines of communication, however it's written. It's not enforceable.
And is our lighting, it says in compliance with 1303 of the Rockbridge County Land Development, is our ordinance, is our 1303, is that compliant with night sky compliance and IDA guidelines?
It's my understanding, working with other businesses in the area, if you will, that it's not 100% dark sky compliance, but it is a very restrictive lighting ordinance. It requires all lighting of a certain lumen to be fully shielded and face it down. And that's the crux of it, not to have, obviously light pollution is the issue that we're.
I just wondered if we then, if rather than having it, the 1303 Rockbridge, if we should have their more restrictive, what they've suggested, the night sky compliant with IDA guidelines rather than.
I'm comfortable with, staff is comfortable with the 1303, of course, we work well with that. I'm uncertain on what differences are in 1303, or I'm not as familiar to say it bluntly, I'm not familiar with the full-blown dark sky compliance.
Okay.
I do know, working with the Natural Bridge, they of course pride themselves, the Natural Bridge State Park, they pride themselves rightfully so on being dark sky compliant. They've achieved that goal. And I've worked with them closely on the parking lot lighting across the street from them. That was, of course, Chaos Mountain Brewery and a much larger parking lot to the rear of Chaos Mountain Brewery, and worked with the lighting engineer and the Natural Bridge State Park to ensure that was in compliance.
Right.
I do not believe, I'm uncertain if that's been installed yet, but there are many examples I can give you of the correctly installed lights per 1303, and it is restricted.
And the only other question I had to do with 125 vehicles. Is that going to work with, when you have caterers and,
Yeah.
band and all that? I mean, 125 is going to be,
Yeah, inclusive of staff and exactly. So we include
Vendors.
all of that. Yeah.
okay.
I mean, and again, having all the properties having to be rented out, that alone is going to cut a lot of traffic down as
Sure.
far as keeping people off Road Grant Trail and Mackey's Lane.
Right.
So,
Okay. Those were mine. Thank you.
Don't have any other questions for the others?
I don't.
I just want to thank y'all for going to meet with the surrounding landowners.
thank you.
Kudos
All right.
to you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, we had our public hearing last week. So I think we're at the point of discussion with us. Comments?
If they've agreed to install night sky compliant lighting, I think probably we need to toss that in there. Conditions.
I just jotted down what they had up there. So night sky compliant IDA guidelines. And what do you think about the traffic control flaggers for 50 more attendees? I mean, is that something we need to have in there?
That's gonna be in,
That's
that's
part of
gonna
the
be on
business
their
model.
property. They're gonna be the ones fighting
Yeah.
the traffic. It's not.
Okay.
That won't be out on the road. The
Doesn't help
stop sign at the end of the road and
I just see that as part of your business model and not as a.
yeah, but the stop sign at the road coming out at Borden Grand, I think that's a good idea because that will hopefully alleviate somebody pulling in front of somebody.
And we have the approval by the VDOT. Chris, I don't know if there's a way that we can ask VDOT to do a speed survey along Board Grant. I don't know if there's a way to do that, but that's not within our purview of planning.
Same thing with event manager. Don't need to have that in there as a,
I don't think so. That's part of the
I do
business
think we
model.
need to put in the landscaping around the pavilion, just because I think that's something they've agreed to with their neighbors. And like you said, who knows if they're going to own it in 5 years or 25 years, That's important.
Whatever we do now is gonna seem a little restrictive probably it may seem to Weatherly's, and maybe everybody else, but the special exception permit or follows the property from now on. So, I mean, whatever we do now is kind of a forever deal. So be a little restricted now to make sure we're taking care of the existing landowners and property owners around that are next to them is what the goal is now, and mitigate any kind of effects it could have on their life. And anybody moving in, they don't know what's there, so they'll realize what they're getting into when they
Right.
move there.
Right.
So Lucas, just do me a favor, pulling your mic a little bit closer to your mouth. I appreciate it.
I usually
Thank you very
speak loud
much.
enough, but anyway, sorry.
So is the stop sign something that we have any purview over? Is that just something that goes to VDOT?
That's not gonna be VDOT's, that's gonna be private.
Okay.
So based on a couple of these comments, I'd like to make a couple comments. So unfortunately, staff was not provided these draft conditions until this morning. And I do foresee some issues with some of these. And I've talked to surrounding landowners, I talked to Weatherly's. For example, owner to install and maintain a landscape acoustic buffer of living plants around the wine pavilion to provide further buffer from sound from that pavilion. That's pretty, and there's a lot of room for interpretation there. So if we do want to do that, what Planning Commission does is requires a landscaping plan showing what trees they are, where they're going to go. This would imply that there would be trees all the way around. The way I'm reading it, it would be all the way around the existing pavilion, and I don't think that's the intent of the draft motion.
Yeah.
Or I won't even say draft motion of the additional provisions that were under consideration. Lighting, I've said it, before, I'm not familiar at all. If y'all want me to do some research on the International Dark Sky Association guidelines, I don't know if that's one document that is easily achievable. Again, I am familiar with the County of Rockbridge land development regulations, and that is a restrictive lighting ordinance that we are familiar with and had a lot of success with implementing those on some recent projects, I'll say.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of this thing. I think it's going to be good for the county. And I think they've gone a lot of restrictions to try to help prevent the neighbors. I think there's too many fast people driving through who don't live on Borden Grant Road, and they're using it as that's not part of the winery or the special events. And I don't think it's a public highway or a public road. All right,
So I would like to state the number 5. I did talk with, I can't remember who today, but I did talk with someone today about the Sunday events, and I was uncertain if that was special exceptions have conditions. The conditions don't have to be, unlike rezoning proffers, the special exception conditions don't have to be voluntary and they don't have to be agreed upon by the applicant. With that being said, based on what I've heard today from the applicant, the number 5 would be modified to say all site, the original one that I read, where all site activities would be concluded by 9 p.m. on weekdays and 10 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. So based on the conversation and clarification, I think we should revise that to all site activities will be concluded by 9 p.m. Monday through Thursday and 10 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. Period. No events on Sundays.
but the winery can, I mean, we got to make sure that we
Mhm.
understand that this is
Absolutely.
two different
Right.
issues. The winery is open on Sundays.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. No, these draft conditions only pertain to special events.
That's what I want to make sure everybody understands.
That's
Yes.
correct.
So that wouldn't affect them to have music for their winery guests on a Sunday or a food truck or anything along those lines. correct?
Not if it's in compliance with the code of Rockbridge County Code, which there are some discussions on the outdoor music performers if you have on the weekends. There is some discussions. I've talked to Michaels and others on that, and it needs additional clarification if that's in compliance with the outdoor, with the arts, obviously the entertainment and amusement section, chapter 4, I believe it is, of the county code, which is essentially commonly referred to as the noise ordinance.
Right. Okay, call for the question.
I make a motion that the planning commission recommend to the board of supervisors that the special exception permit for special events in the agricultural general A2 zoning district per LDR section 603.03-24 on property known as Echo Odessa Vineyards located at 340 Echo Odessa Lane, Fairfield, and identified as tax map number 64-15-B1 and 64-15-B in the South River Magisterial District be approved with the following conditions. 1, vineyard tasting room operations shall be closed, not open to the public during special events. 2, permit is limited to no more than 52 special events per year. 3, substantial compliance with concept plan prepared by an applicant titled schematic plan showing parking and proposed venue at Echo Odessa Vineyards. 4, events will be limited to a maximum of 250 attendees with no more than 125 vehicles on site for events. 5, all site activities will be concluded by 9 p.m. Monday through Thursday and 10 p.m. on Friday and Saturday. No events will be held on on Sundays. 6, adequate off-street parking facilities and traffic controls will be provided. No parking along Borden Grant Road, Route 706. 7, alcoholic beverages will not be self-served. 8, all trash will be taken directly to the landfill and not to the county collection centers or county green boxes. 9, any amplified music must be within an enclosed structure. 10, lighting shall be in compliance with 1303.00 of the Rockbridge County Land Development Regulations. 11, no aerial fireworks or gun salute shall be permitted. No open air fire shall be permitted by attendees. 12, approval contingent on county building department, Virginia Department of Transportation, and Health Department approvals. And I think we decided 11, stop sign. Is that applicant shall install a stop sign at the end of the road at Borden Grant? Is that right? There you go.
All right, motion is made.
Before we second it, the only modifications we made was just so as far as the staff, we made modifications number 5 and we added number 13.
Yes.
Okay. The other discussions that y'all had that I don't want to slip away from us is the event manager. I think is the only one that there might be some additional or the event manager at all times. And then of course, expand on the dark sky question. And then the landscaping, of course.
I had an event manager on mine as far as one of the.
Okay,
something
so
we
we'll
put
add that
out.
as number 4, an event manager shall be on site.
And since they agreed, I think we need to throw that dark, night sky compliant lighting in. At
Okay.
number 15.
But we can just.
Well, we
put that
can
and
just
make-
amend that with
amend
number 10.
Whatever,
Right.
Number 10, however you want.
Number 10, lighting shall be in compliance with 1303 of Rockbridge County Land Development Regulations, as well as,
Yes.
what was the night
Night
sky?
sky compliant.
International, what is referred to in the PowerPoint, again, I don't have a clue what it, the International Dark Sky Association, IDA guidelines.
Okay.
for fixtures and bulbs, and also in compliance with Rockbridge County Code provision. So it would be, the language would be International Dark Sky Association, in parentheses, IDA guidelines for fixtures and bulbs.
Get that, Chris? Because I'm not gonna be able to say it again. Okay, there you go.
That's good.
All right.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thanks, everybody, for all their input. Moving on to number 7, Devin Voss and Gail Millam. Wesley Chapel Road application for rezoning from residential R1 to Ag General A2. Staff?
Yes, sir. Mr. Darwin Voss is in attendance this evening. I once again have a brief PowerPoint. Bear with me here. I'm gonna pull it up. All right, this is a rezoning application from Mr. Voss and Miss Malem. Again, this is a rezoning application from the residential general zoning district, that's the R1 zoning district, to the agricultural and general use districts, the A2 zoning district. Property details, went over the landowner's name at the beginning, located on the east side of Wesley Chapel Road. And so the property is identified, the yellow on the map is the residential zoning district. The white on the map across the interstate is the agricultural, and then you do have some agricultural transitional in the pink area to the north. As far as the tax maps associated with the rezoning, it's going to be 88-5-1H, 88-5-1H1, 88-5-1GA, 88-7-2C, 88-7-2, and finally 1D. Total acreage of all parcels involved in the rezoning is approximately 100.895 acres per tax records. It was placed in an open space easement in 2007, and that's an open space easement commonly referred to as a conservation easement with VOF. And rereading and talking with Mr. Voss today and talking, I think we got to do that. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry about that. So in talking with Mr. Voss and reviewing the conservation or the open space easement, I am uncertain how that was placed in a conservation easement or open space easement technically in 2007 because it is in the residential zoning district. I was unable to find any zoning planning commission resolution and support, but it is what it is, and it's been placed that way for approximately 14 years. Currently being used as agricultural purposes. There's no public water or public sewer in this area, and it's surrounded by residential on 3 sides and agricultural, surrounded by residential zoning district on 3 sides, and the agricultural zoning district A2 is across the interstate. This is actually one that I'm going to do next one. I apologize. I meant to do this one on the next one. This just shows sort of a location map of the Voss properties located here. And then these are the other properties that the Baker properties that we're going to have at the very next public hearing. With that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. Darwin Voss just to review the application and answer any questions that the Planning Commission may have.
I don't know, I guess I just want to turn it into agriculture. We put it into conservation easements to basically keep the residential off of it. We always have the intent to keep it. I don't know how it got zoned residential or agriculture, or didn't get zoned agriculture when we switched it. But I had a surveyor looking at what went on there. It's just basically just farm ground. I've got about 110 cattle out there, so just want to keep it farm. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Voss. So at this time, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Staff, is there anybody
No, sir, there's no one signed up, but we'll recognize anyone if anyone would like to speak. I don't see any. Let me check.
Is there anybody electronic?
Absolutely. So there are no open question and answers. There are no chats. And there's one attendee. If you would like to make a comment on the false application, please raise your hand at this time. Not seeing any, we will turn it back over to the chair.
Okay, we'll now close the public hearing, bring it back to the committee. I think since this has been in the
Straightforward.
conservation easement, it can't be
So
developed. So I think
Right.
keeping it agriculture, given its proper designation, makes sense to me.
Okay, I will make a motion to recommend to the Board of Supervisors that the rezoning of an aggregate of 100.895 acres located at 529 Wesley Chapel Road and identified as tax map 88-5-18H, 88-5-1H1, 88-5-1GA, 88-7-2C, 88-7-2, and 88-7-1D for the residential general R1 zoning district to the agricultural and general uses A2 zoning district be approved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Moving on to the next order of business.
The next one is Mr. James M. Baker Jr., trustee, right over the hill, so to speak, from the Voss property. I do have a brief, even briefer PowerPoint, I believe. So with that. This is a second rezoning application from the general residential zoning district R1 to the agricultural and general use districts A2. As far as the property details of the Baker parcel owned by Mr. James M. Baker Jr. trustee, the property is on the corner of Poplar Hill and Wesley Chapel Road. Proposed rezoning consists of 3 total tax map numbers. They include 88-3-A1, 88-5-1, and 88-3-B. It's a total of 30.816 acres per tax records, and this is highlighted in the hatched area here. So this is parcel number 1, parcel number 2, parcel number 3. Again, total is 30.816 acres. Currently being used for agricultural purposes and surrounded by the by the residential zoning property on the northeast south side, and then the A2 zoning district on the west side across the street from Poplar Hill itself. With that, I would like to turn the floor over to Mr. James Baker to review additional details and answer any questions that the Planning Commission may have.
Hi, good evening. I don't really have a whole lot else. We bought the property, the 6.5 acres of it in 2004. We've added on the adjacent parcels over the years. At least 10 years ago, we began when we bought the adjoining properties, we leased it out to someone to keep cattle on it and cut it for hay. We have a different tenant now who is only planning to use it for hay purposes. It has been in land use for a number of years. We didn't even realize it was zoned residential. We were kind of surprised to find that. So that's why we're trying to request to bring it in with the current usage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So a little bit of follow-up, and I should have done this with the Voss application as well, because he brought up the timing of the rezoning. So this entire area has been residential since the conception of zoning in Rockbridge County in the early 70s. Again, this property, there's no public water and public sewer available currently at this property, just like the Voss property. So I did want to include that.
And it is contiguous with A2.
And it is contiguous to A2 to the west across the road from the Poplar Hill. Yes, sir.
All right, this time we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Is there anybody physically present to speak?
No one has signed up, but if I wish to speak, now's the time. Not seeing anyone. Let me check the question and answers. There are no open question and answers. There are no open chats. And if there's anyone that would like to let me go to panelists. If there's anyone that would like to make a comment, now is the appropriate on the Baker application. Now is the appropriate time to raise your hand. Not seeing any in all three of those, I'll turn the floor back over to the chair.
Okay. This whole area up there is pretty much rural agriculture. I'm a little surprised it's an R1
Right.
personally, but nevertheless, I don't have a problem with this one at all.
So I make a motion to recommend,
Wait,
oh, sorry.
I think we need to close. the
Oh, we have
public
to close the public hearing.
Oh.
The public hearing is now closed
Here we go. Okay.
officially.
Good catch. I make a motion to recommend to the Board of Supervisors that the rezoning of an aggregate of 30.816 acres plus or minus located near 255 Poplar Hill Road and identified as tax map number 88-3-A1, 88-5-1, and 88-3-B from residential general R1 district to the agricultural and general uses A2 district be approved.
We have a motion. Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Moving on to number 9.
Number 9 has been voided. Number 9 was a third rezoning in the Poplar Hill area made by John Michael Wilkins and Lucy Rex Wilkins. Their address was 163 Poplar Hill Road. That was scheduled for a public hearing, but on Monday, I received an email from the Joneses. The Joneses are the new landowner of that 5.7 acre parcel, I believe it is. And so therefore, the Wilkins do not have any vested interest in the property or rights to the property because it did close on, I think it was November 4th, 2021, of course. With that being said, that application for that rezoning is voided because they no longer own the property. I have talked to the Joneses about started the discussion with the Joneses, which is the new landowner, on the pros and cons of a potential rezoning for them. But as far as tonight goes, that one has been removed off the agenda.
All right. Number 9 for me was the Hank Leach
All right, fair
public
enough.
hearing.
Yes, sir. Mr. Leach is in the audience. Bear with me. One more. All right, this application is by Hank Leach. It's an application for a special exception for a special event, for special events in the agricultural and general use districts. That's the A2 zoning district. A little bit about the property details. Property is located at 2920 South Buffalo Road. Tax map number 93. It consists of 3 total parcels. Tax map number 93-A-19 is owned by Mr. Leach and his sibling Blake Leach. 93 and that is the home parcel, I believe. 93-A-32 is owned by the individual Hank Leach, and 93-A-32A is owned by Blake Leach. Of course, Blake and Hank have signed the application for the special exception application, but the applicant is Hank Leach solely. Of the 3 tax parcels, it consists of 10 acres total. It's in the A2 zoning district and surrounded by the A2 zoning district. A portion of the property is in the 100-year floodplain, but per the development map, all the parking and all facilities are located outside of the 100-year floodplain. Again, Mr. Leach has applied for a special special exception permit for special events, proposed to lease the property for special events. Small Creek, Buffalo Creek, Small Creek nearby, which will potentially be stocked for fish for the guests. As far as proposed conditions, these are very similar to other proposed conditions we've talked about without the modifications to the Echo Adesso. But being a relatively small piece of property for this type of activity, talked to Mr. Leach and we've talked to VDOT, and these are the proposed conditions. Number 1, events will be limited to a maximum of 100 attendees with no more than 35 vehicles on site for events. All site activities will be concluded by 11 p.m. Adequate off-street parking facilities and traffic controls will be provided. No parking along South Buffalo Road. That's State Route 611. Number 4, alcoholic beverages will not be self-served. Alcoholic beverages will not be self-served. Number 5, all trash taken directly to landfill and not the county collection centers or county green boxes. Number 6, any amplified music must be within an enclosed structure and concluded by 11 p.m. Number E7, lighting shall be in compliance with 1303 of the County of Rockbridge Land Development Regulations. No, number 8, no aerial fireworks shall be permitted. No outdoor fire shall be permitted by attendees. Number 9 is approval contingent on County Building Department, VDOT, Virginia Department of Transportation, and Health Department approvals. With that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. Hank Leach to review additional details of the project and answer any questions that the Planning Commission may have.
This would like to apply for this special assessment permit to further the opportunity that my parents have left me by working for and paying for a piece of property. Beautiful piece of property, if I may say so. Got Buffalo Creek on the west side there. Nice creek, fly fishing, trout fishing, if so be it. Plenty of room, park, move around. I kind of like to work with the event host, if you will, on that, and maybe let them kind of set that up at how they would like. I would like to stock the creek with trout so that the people can go fishing. No amplified music, and just a small, quiet little spot. Have a nice little peaceful wedding. And I've talked to all my neighbors. The only person that I wasn't able to actually speak to was Jack Wallen. He owns the property directly behind me on Timber Rock Trail. I called him, left him 2 voicemails on both of his numbers, but I spoke to Mr. Persley that owns the property that adjoins the creek. He's very excited about it. I talked to Mr. Daniels, owns a cabin on the hill. He doesn't seem to have any worries about it. I'd just like to apply and see if y'all have any other conditions that you'd like to talk about, and take it from there.
Thank you, Hank. Okay, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Is there anybody physically present?
There's no one signed up, but at this time, we'll recognize anyone who'd like to speak. Not seeing anyone. Let me do my spiel here. There are no open question and answers, and there are no live chats. At this time, if there's an attendee that would like to make comments on the Leach application, please raise your hand at this time. Not seeing any hands raised and no questions and answers, no chats. We did not receive any emails. We did not receive any written comments on this one. With that, I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission.
I'm just taking a look at kind of comparing the exceptions that we required at Echo Adesso and wondering, like the 11 p.m. time thing, there was a reason why we switched it to 10 p.m., on the other application. Just wondering if that was.
So that was the Weatherly's proper, so.
Well, these, again, based on that comment, the conditions, unlike rezoning proffers associated with the rezoning, conditions don't have to be voluntary and they do not have to be agreed upon. So if that's something the commission would like to discuss, now would be the appropriate time to do so.
Well, so that number of events per year and the days of the week, hours, those were things that we included in our other special exception permits. I just think there are things we need to talk about, for this as well, if that's something we want in there, or how you guys are feeling about that.
Well, it does go with property, so we Leach's ever decide to sell it.
Even though they are not voluntary and they do not have to be agreed upon, I would suggest, obviously discussing with the applicant to see his views on some of the proposed conditions, just as far as the business model, and if he would feel that they would be acceptable to this application.
Right. I mean, I just think, in this situation, we don't have neighbors that are coming and bringing these things up, but, are they going to be happy if it's, 7 days a week till 11 o'clock every night? I'm just thinking down the road.
And it does follow the property.
Right.
One question I had was, it's three parcels here that are owned by 2 different people. One of them owned by two gentlemen, and then each one of the gentlemen owns another parcel of it. We'll combine them all together for an event venue.
We both signed the application.
So it affects, I mean, it's for all three parcels.
Mr. Leach, what numbers are you looking at per year or hoping for per year? Right. So would you envision having something during, say, the heat of the summer? Would you envision having something every day, or is that? Do you want Mr. Leach to come
Yes, if you
forward?
could, just so that-
Hank, if you come forward, please.
Zoom. If you could talk to the mic, yes, sir.
As I reiterate, I don't want to limit myself on Sunday as I think Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sundays is fair. And like I said, this isn't going to be, it's going to be a lot, I don't know if it's cheaper, but it's not going to be as high end as these other events. And I just don't want to limit, if somebody has, they can't take off all week to work, but, they still want to get married, people get married. I got married on Sunday.
Becoming more and more popular because there's not so many Saturdays in the year. So it's just that Friday or Sunday now. And what about the time thing? Is 11, does it need to be 11? Could you live with 10?
I could live with 10. That wouldn't be a big hassle to me, but personally, I mean, I feel that it's almost like Mayberry right here anyway, where it closed down at 9 o'clock. So, if everybody, they want to celebrate a little bit longer to 11, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but if you guys think that's a problem, then I would be happy to oblige you guys.
I think 11 is reasonable.
I like the 10 just because I thought about that people then have time to get home, when you're on those dark roads and whatever, they're leaving a little bit earlier, but now, and I'm also thinking about the neighbors, people who go to sleep earlier or whatever, but playing the devil's advocate.
The only question I got is back to the property again.
Mhm.
I guess this is as much the point, looking at Vicky as anybody. You're sitting here and you got a piece of property that's divided into 3 parcels. And both of them are applying for this special exception permit. And one parcel gets sold off. Or what does the special exception permit go with? Does it go with the parcel gets sold off? Does it go with the parcel that's left? Or does it get split? Can you have 2 special exception permits or two venues off the same property? I'm asking the question because I'm a what if guy. So.
It's a good question. It's a good question. I'm not sure I have an answer for that. It's probably advisable to assign that permit to one specific property with the ability to use the others. It's not a situation we've seen very
Right.
often.
I mean, it's this is for future. I mean, this is not looking at y'all and you and your brother and going, oh yeah, you're gonna sell it and do things. But 34 years down the road, you may go done next. What's it gonna be then?
Well, if it would help to ease your concerns, my brother and my mom and I, it's been we own this property, and my mother inherited a property in Collierstown, and our family plan has always been I get this place and my brother gets the other place. We have talked about putting it all in my name, all 3 parcels, and then he gets all the property in Carterstown. It's not in process right now, but that's the plan that we've always had. And I'm not planning on selling anytime. I know stuff happens and you can't control it, but no plans to sell.
So are you saying we need to put this in the parcel that's in his name with the ability to use the other 2 parcels? Is that what you're saying?
No, I think we,
Yes.
It needs to be the one with the house on it.
Am I correct to say that's the one in both y'all's names, the house parcel? Yes.
Okay. And then the other 2 parcels are one in your name and one in your brother's.
I think we link it to the one with both you and your brother, and if he sells to you or you all through the family plan, he gets the Collierstone property. And assume that the deed would then reflect that you would be the sole owner.
Correct.
Well, the other thing is though, if they never abandon the lot line, I mean, you still have 3 separate parcels. Even if it's in his name, you know what I'm saying?
2 of them would be in his name. He could actually combine those 2 parcels. So,
You know what I'm saying? That he could sell off the one with the house. Or he could sell off the one that doesn't
still
have the
could
house
sell
and
one
say,
off,
oh, well,
but-
that one has a special exception too, because it was part of it.
Right, so that's what I'm saying. You're gonna have to apply it to the one piece of property with the house on it, which is already in both y'all's names, which is how the application was written out in both y'all's names. And with the ability to use the other 2, but it's the special exception is on the one.
Goes
property
with the
house.
one.
That's the way I see it. Gives you the ability to do it, and then either you or your brother, then or whoever ended up with that one piece of property would have that ability. Then. To have a
So is that the tax map 94-A-19 4 acre? Is that the one that has the house on
A19.
it? Mm-hmm.
The 4 acres is the house parcel, correct? Thank you. Yes. So with this, I got a question for Ms. Huffman. Would this be handled, this would not be, as far as the discussion we're having now, this would not be handled under the conditions, but rather the drafting of the ordinance as far as issuing the ordinance, the 1 parcel with the ability to utilize the other 2 parcels?
Yes, but I think for now, it should be just, and then we'll incorporate that into the ordinance when it's presented to the board.
We wouldn't just take out the other 2 tax map parcels and make the motion for tax map 19, A19.
You could do it that way, but then a condition would be that the other
Use the
2
other 2
parcels
parcels.
could be used in
That seems
conjunction,
to make more
but
sense
don't
to
have
me.
the
It's-
permit.
That way you're putting it with this parcel and then in the conditions, giving them the
conjunction.
a right to use
Yeah,
the
let's
other 2 parcels.
You can do that.
Okay.
let's do it that way. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leach. Any other discussions? All right. Call for the motion.
Somebody else want to do it? I'm tired of hearing me talk.
Go ahead. You do
All right. I make a motion to recommend to the Board of Supervisors that the special exception permit for special events in the agricultural general A2 zoning district per LDR section 603.03-24 located at 2920 South Buffalo Road and identified as tax map number 94-A-19 4.0 acres per tax record in the Buffalo Magisterial District be approved with the following conditions. 1, events will be limited to a maximum of 100 attendees with no more than 35 vehicles on site for events. 2, all site activities will be concluded by, do we want 10 or 11? You want to stick with 11? By
I
11
personally would go
PM?
with 11.
Okay. Adequate off-street parking facilities and traffic controls will be provided. No parking along South Buffalo Road, Route 611. 4, alcoholic beverages will not be self-served. 5, all trash will be taken directly to the landfill and not to county collection centers or county green boxes. 6, any amplified music must be within an enclosed structure and concluded by 11 PM. 7, lighting shall be in compliance with 1303.00 of Rockbridge County Land Development Regulations. 8, no aerial fireworks shall be permitted. No outdoor fire shall be permitted by attendees. 9, approval contingent on County Building Department, Virginia Department of Transportation, and Health Department approvals. And 10, how do we word this? 93-A-32 and 93-A-32A shall be allowed to be used for the special events?
Yes.
Okay.
Second. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, coming up with discussion on zoning text amendment, discussion on the proposed art, music, and cultural centers
Yes.
ordinance.
And thankfully for the next few, I do not have a PowerPoint presentation, but I would like to briefly review the next agenda item, zoning text amendment, proposed discussion for art and music cultural centers ordinance. And this is the information provided at the October 13th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. After hearing the request from Mr. James Panabaker, the Planning Commission directed staff to research and prepare information concerning the definition of cultural music centers to expand the definition to include cultural art centers. Mr. Panabaker is the owner of Thunderbridge Campground LLC and would like to have, that's in the Arnold Valley area, the former juvenile detention center. And would like to have the ability to rent spaces to artists and have the ability for those artists to hold workshops and art shows. Per section 302.56 of the County of Rockbridge Land Development Regulations, the cultural music centers are currently defined as a facility, quote, a facility where a admission fee is charged and a group of individuals gather at a regular basis for purpose of listening or participating in live music conducted within an enclosed structure and on an intermittent basis where dance, arts, crafts, and food festivals, classes, and demonstrations may be held in the immediate vicinity, end quote. To facilitate the discussion, staff has drafted two definitions that could be utilized for the intended purpose. If the commission would like to move forward, staff believes it'd be best to separate the two uses. That would be the one use. Number one is cultural music center, and cultural. The second use would be the cultural art center, and provide that the uses be uses by special exception in the agricultural zoning district. So that last thing, as far as separating the two out, that goes on. I did not have an opportunity to talk to Mr. Panabaker since that email that I read during the citizen comment period, but that is in line with his suggestion as far as providing for them as separate uses, and then they would be listed as separate uses as far as the zoning text amendment goes, as far as the uses by special exception. So in your again, to facilitate the discussion in your in your package, you have proposed definition changes that include the current definition of a cultural music center, what we went over, and then definitions for the Planning Commission consideration. So number one, or excuse me, 302.56, as far as a cultural art center, this is the same information that's provided in your package, would be defined or could be defined as a facility or groups of facilities where a leasing fee or admission fee is charged and groups or individuals gather for the purpose of participating in the creation or enjoying of arts or crafts within an enclosed structure, and where art shows, craft shows, and classes / demonstrations may be held. And then it would go on to separate the cultural music center out there, and that would be proposed for discussion purposes as 302.56-A, cultural music center, a group or group of facilities where a leasing fee or admission fee is charged, and the groups or individuals gather for the purpose of listening or participating in live music conducted within an enclosed structure. So the emphasis there is obviously where a leasing fee or admission fee is charged. And so the original definition had some language or proposed by the Panabaker family had a proposed definitions that a fee may be charged. Well, if you put in there that it may be charged, that also alludes to that it may not be charged. Staff had some concerns on how that could be interpreted as far as let's say a picking party on Friday or Saturday night on a regular basis in someone's home. Obviously the intent obviously is not to have that be by special exception. And so I think this covers it as far as that concern goes. It would require a leasing fee and or a admission fee. It would be the threshold of requiring a special exception permit, or potentially requiring, depending on the outcome of the discussion. With that, I'll turn it over to the chair for answering questions that the Planning Commission may have.
Great. Anybody have any
question was about the leasing fee or admission fee. I'm thinking about, I know something I've sold recently in the barn. They want to be able to have people come out and see their art and stuff like that, but they wouldn't be charging a fee. They basically would be opening it up for people to come out and see their art, but they wouldn't necessarily charge a fee. I just didn't know why that was important, because now I understand you're saying, because you don't want to just have a picking party on Saturday night. every
And be
Saturday night.
required for a special exception in an enclosed structure. Of course.
Right, okay.
And these I would like to, unfortunately, just with that as a heavy agenda this evening, I did not have what I would consider, we did not have what I would consider adequate time to fully vet this, to figure out what other localities are doing, those type of things. So I would like, some input, obviously, is the purpose of this, so putting it out to the planning commission for your review and input.
I'd like to know what other localities are doing with this, and also what if a person in their own home hired a musician or something to come in and asked everybody to chip in something to help defray the costs. Is that an admissions, or is that I'm just.
Same thing with the craft show, somebody has been doing all their crafts and they want to invite people in, kind of have an open house thing.
And then somebody offers them, oh, I really
Right.
like this piece.
It's a donation, and or something like that.
So I think there's some more
research to be done.
more research is necessary here. So staff could do that for.
It's a good first stab. And the only thing I would say is in the way it currently reads, talks about classes, demonstrations may be held in the immediate vicinity. And then we go to saying these activities can occur within an enclosed structure. So you're limiting, I don't know if there's a way, if you have an art show, if people want to spill out, if it's a nice day, you want to set up a table outside of a building, I think you quite have the ability to do that and not necessarily say within an enclosed structure all the time. Music I could see, especially if it's amplified, but the Cultural Arts Center may be less
Yeah.
restrictive.
Good point.
Could set up tents or something. I mean, something like that.
I agree. That's a good point, and that's the feedback we were looking for. And I do agree that they're two separate uses. You have a cultural arts center that is a separate use from the cultural music center. We were able to do a little bit of research to figure out how the current cultural music definition got on the books, and that was actually 2000. I think it was 2007, if I recall correctly, but it pertained to the Clark's old time music on Ridge Road. Yes, and that's why they had been doing, Mr. Clark and family had been doing the old time music shows for a very long time, but they wanted to start charging a fee, and that's what propelled the current definition forward.
Okay, I do think that separating them out is a good idea, and I think that's a good first step. But before we take that to public hearing, I think it needs to be vetted out a little bit.
So what I'm hearing is obviously expand the definition for the Cultural Arts Center to have some sort of outdoor facilities, the ability to have outdoor facilities, explore what other localities are doing, and deal with if a person has a open house and they hire a band and they require donations, to get in the door type thing.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And it could very well be something open to the public. Obviously, the intent here is to have some influence on the cultural arts centers, but not be over restrictive. So certainly we'll take that and run with it.
Okay. All right. So we move on. Okay. Continued discussion for the zoning tax amendment for proposed wood yards.
Yes, this is a continued discussion. I don't have a PowerPoint for this, but I would like to review some material. At the September 8th, 2021 Planning Commission, the Planning Commission recommended approval to the Board of Supervisors of the proposed zoning and text amendments, which would define wood yards and provide them by special exception in the agricultural limited. A1 zoning district and the agricultural and general use district, which is A2. At the September 27th, 2021 Board of Supervisors meeting, the board held its public hearing for the proposed text amendments. While the Board of Supervisors was supportive of the use by special exception in the A1 and A2 zoning districts, the board expressed concerns on approving the proposed zoning text amendment without additional parameters/criteria for the proposed use. The board approved a motion to refer the zoning text amendment for wood yards back to the planning commission for further consideration related to the 100-year floodplain designated as a special flood hazard area, minimum lot size, buffer requirements, and scale of operation. At the October 13th, 2021 meeting, the planning commission directed staff to research certain criteria regarding wood yards ordinance in the surrounding counties. Staff has included this research in the commission's package for discussion. So of course, in your discussion, in your package, it's a document titled Research on Industrial Storage and Wood Yards and Zoning Ordinance in Surrounding Counties. And the examples that we gave you were Augusta County, Bedford not prescribed, Rockingham County, Bath not prescribed, Albemarle County, Nelson County, Shenandoah was not prescribed, Amherst County, and that is it. So with that, I'll turn the floor back over to the chair for further discussion.
Okay. I think there was, our recommendation was let the special exception, which was sent back to us, is that it was not going to float with them. So if you look at I guess it's Augusta, where it says the construction, placement, of storage of any object, and this is for prohibited floodplain overlays, FPO districts. Construction, placement, or storage of any object subject to flotation or movement during flooding. Such objects may be constructed, placed, or stored if properly anchored in accordance with a plan prepared by a professional engineer and approved by the county engineer. We don't have a county engineer, to my knowledge, do we?
We do not, no, sir. At one time we did Mr. Tom Higgins, but that's been many moons ago.
Right. So if we want to open any doors, anything within the floodplain, we would have to make some special considerations for the things not being able to float away. Other than that, I guess we'd have to come up with some boundaries, which I think those can be. But essentially, you know, we talked about this last time, and floods and logs. We've had huge trees deposited in our pastures from floods, and they do float. That was in the raging current, not in the areas where there's just water coming up, which is technically flooded, but it's not moving the water technically. So I think that's been our bugaboo for.
I think it's just really hard because I think we've gone back and forth and we've said, you know, the special exception is just that each piece of property has its own unique attributes, and we need to look at those individually. And so to just blanket say we're not going to allow these specific things within 100-year floodplain. I read something about, you know, storing 1 foot above the base flood elevation. Well, whole property is in floodplain. You can't really do that.
Elevated element. I mean, if you had elevated piers or something like that, are there ways that? And these are the questions. So if we would allow it in a floodplain, then it would have to have some sort of professional engineering.
Which we talked about
mitigation.
that too, you know,
That would
basically, if you're, rather than just say flat out, we're not gonna allow it, we'll allow it with these parameters, that there has to be a professional engineer, there has to be, it has to be the floating object, floating whatever, timbers have to be 1 foot above, stored 1 foot above the base floodplain, things like that. But to put them in the ordinance, it's just a matter of deciding what you're gonna put in an ordinance, because then you're tied to it forever.
Right. I think what we need to do is make sure that we are looking at what's good for, this is not one site that we're looking at, it's for all sites.
Right.
We need to put in the floodplain.
They,
I still feel strongly that it should be a use in these two zoning districts, forestry and agriculture. And, I think that should be the first step. And then the special exception process handles any special exceptions, being a floodplain. They either can or cannot be mitigated. So, if the board wants us to put some minimum lot size, buffer requirements and scale of operation, I think we could certainly do that. But I mean, there again, the special exception process should take care of that. I saw in one of the counties talking about limiting the hours of operation. No wood products should be loaded or unloaded between 12 midnight and 7 a.m. I mean, I think that's something that you can put on the individual exception, not the overall ordinance. I mean, we could certainly do that, but a lot of these other uses don't have that unless we overhaul the whole A1, A2 zoning regs. I think it's picking on one as they come. I mean, I don't know if we have the energy right now to overhaul all the uses.
We've had a lot, so of course, I've said it many times in a public setting, in some cases, the Rockbridge County land development regulations is an antiquated ordinance, and we've had a lot of discussions here in the recent months about a major overhaul of the land development regulations. They really were conceived, the majority of the definitions and permitted uses and uses by special exception were developed and adopted by the Board of Supervisors in 72, I think it was, as far as the original zoning. They came from the community's housing, I believe, department, as far as the draft recommendations for Virginia in a whole. And since that time, we've obviously made significant changes to the ordinance, but there is a lot of older information in there. And of course, as reported, it's more common nowadays to have the definition provided and any criteria that y'all want. Same thing as the solar. I'm not trying to beat the horse again, but it's the same thing as the planning commission has directed staff on the solar ordinance. So we have a use by special exception as a public utility. And so we allow that public utility by special exception. However, the planning commission in the Rockbridge County Farm Bureau wrote us a letter. RAC has been involved in that discussion, and all parties believe that we should have a bona fide solar ordinance. And so that is it's more common to have a permitted use or use by special exception with certain criteria. And so if the planning commission feels that certain criteria should include some of this information, this would be the appropriate time. If the planning commission does not feel that this zoning text amendment should include some of this criteria, you would be able to pass it to the board with the same information that they requested y'all go back and revisit with the issues that I spoke about.
Okay, so let's take a couple of those. Let's do lot size, minimum of 10 acres.
Minimum.
how about required setback? So a lot of these have, required setback from hours of operation. I mean, I don't know why that can't just be,
You had Augusta Lumber out there that was running, they had a lot of pushback from some of the neighbors, and they had some certain hours that they operated in, couldn't unload on Sundays and do a lot of stuff like that, which to me makes sense if you're trying to be a good neighbor to the people around.
I mean, I don't know why we can't include that. I mean, that seems like that.
You do that. The only problem you got with logs is floating. And the only problem that they'll give you is if they clog up a culvert pipe or a bridge, and cause some road flooding or something to that extent. I mean, that's,
End up on somebody else's property and
Oh.
taking down their fences and.
well, if the fences are coming down, the fences are probably gonna come down anyway if the water's up that high. I've got a creek that runs through my property and I build a fence way more than I should have to, and just because of water getting up. I worked in my previous life, as I call it, I worked for a lumber company. In '94, they had 2 back-to-back floods. They hired a guy and skidded logs from Glasgow to Buena Vista for 3 months probably at a minimum. And the guy skidded them, hauled them, and brought them back up after he got permission to haul them back off of people's property. So it was their loss if they didn't get the logs back. If the landowner didn't want to let them on there, the landowner would have said, can't come, my property, you can't come on it. And that could have very well happened. Whether it did or not, I don't know. Probably did in some cases. The only problem I got with a log yard in a floodplain is if it clogs up a bridge or clogs up a culvert pipe, takes a road out or floods something worse, there could be a loss of life. That's the only problem I got with it. You come in and, I mean, we're sitting here, can they hire an engineer to come in and go, what can we do to keep the logs floating off? Well, in my mind, I've got 3 or 4 ways you can drive some I-beams in the ground for them to float up against and stop. And once they raise up and they'll come back down. If it were to do that on the lower side, there's a lot of different things that could happen to put up something, a barrier to keep logs from floating away.
But I
If
think
they-
they need to have a
if-
professional tell
That's
them
some-
that,
that's
you
some-
know, this-
Yeah, it's not
we're gonna
for
put
me that's just
Right.
me and my,
so that would be,
Common
if
sense.
it's in a floodplain, then you've got to do A, B, C, you know,
Right.
have a professional engineer.
I certainly don't have a problem with it, but we need to, if, I don't, but I don't think they want their logs floating away any more than,
Right.
than you want to see them on your property, or I want to see them tear anybody's fence down, so. But, and also, I mean, when was this? I think we were talking earlier today when I was up here, this property, could possibly not even be in a 100-year floodplain.
So, yeah, the engineer, Mr. Orson, who's present, and I have talked about that. I think we even talked about that at the October meeting, that this is a zone A. It is not an engineered study. It is zone A do not have a base flood elevation determined. And so there is a process through FEMA, through the surveyor, engineer, architect. We've never worked with an architect on the subject. But with that being said, all 3 of those professionals do have the ability to work with FEMA to get a base flood elevation BFE determined, and then find out, potentially do a letter of map amendment, it's called, or a letter of map amendment to see what in a more detailed study, what is in the floodplain and what is out of the floodplain. And so, and we of
Require
course have
that.
done that many a times in the Carter Creek area. I mean, I can give you numerous examples right there around Big Spring of letters of map amendments.
So if in that, you know, if it's in the floodplain, one, storage at least 1 foot above the base flood elevation, that would require them to go out and get a base flood elevation if there's not one on the property currently.
Yes. And I'm uncertain on how that would be achieved with log storage, as far as
they gonna
the
store?
ability to elevate piles of logs, simply put.
It's not like building a house where you can build it up and put the flood doors in the bottom of where the water runs through.
Yeah, any structure in this floodplain is required, I'm sorry, any dwelling in this floodplain is required to be elevated and allow the water to pass through. Any accessory structure is required to have flood vents and or flood proof is what's considered. And that would be the difference between a single family dwelling and a storage building, essentially, accessory structure.
So we go back to a special exception to say, if it's in a floodplain, we need to see a plan by an engineer, somebody that's qualified to say how you're going to deal with flood water on the property, right?
That would make about as good sense as anything right now.
And I just think it's better than just saying flat out, we're not going to allow wood yards on 100-year floodplain.
So with that, if what is the proper steps, Ms. Huffman? This is, of course, we've had a public hearing with the Planning Commission in September, I believe it was. at September 8th, the Planning Commission held a public hearing. At the 27th of September, the Board of Supervisors held a public hearing and of course approved a motion to refer to the zoning text amendments for wood yards back to the Planning Commission for further considerations of the issues I spoke of earlier. Now that we're in this process, does it require a motion to take it back to the Board of Supervisors as currently proposed? Or would that
I'm not
just?
sure. We're trying to send it back to them as currently. I mean, it seems to me like we've now got some things that we want in there.
Okay, I
which
apologize.
are-
I was thinking the conversation was directed towards doing it by the special exception process.
Well, but we were saying there were things that they want to see some things in there, and I think we should send it back with some things in there, like a lot size minimum, required setbacks, hours of operation. I mean, isn't that where we're going with this?
Yes.
Yeah. so
Yes.
You gotta
I
have.
mean, I think we can't send it back to him and say, we just really want to deal with all of those things in special exceptions. Because those are all things that are going to be in every single special exception. We're going to want to have hours of operation and setbacks and lot sizes. So we might as well, then we can give them what they're asking for, which is a little more detail and restriction.
So the discussion at the Board of Supervisors level was the additional considerations of the 100-year floodplain, minimum lot size, buffer requirements, and scale of operation. So I do think, as far as hours of operation, that would be, in my opinion, that could be contingent upon obviously the size of the parcel. And if you have a large parcel with this use in the smack dab middle, it may be more palatable to the surrounding community to have longer hours of operations. I can run up and get the other special exception permits that we have two, to my knowledge, we have two existing commercial sawmills that are operating under special exception with associated conditions.
But do you see a problem with putting I mean, even if they're in the middle of 100 acres, they're still going to have trucks coming and going and,
You're gonna have to have some kind of time limits on that because there's gonna be trucks running in there.
right.
And loaders running and backup alarms running and that type stuff. And so to keep the neighbors,
Right, whether it's on
Happy.
10 acres or 100 acres, we
You-
still, I think, should do that. And then I think the other thing about is dealing with the floodplain to give some parameters. If it's in the floodplain, then we want to see, a PE, that's come up with a plan and,
most of these guys, I think, running log yards are gonna be daylight anyway because they want to see what they're buying or see what's getting hauled in.
Right.
They're not gonna be in log
They
yards
don't
are
want logs coming in.
inherently dangerous enough to be fooling around nighttime with a bunch of logs or that type of stuff.
So I'll just remind the commission, last month's meeting, you advised staff to look into additional county research, which was supplied to you today. And then you, for ordinance sake, to draft an ordinance, you asked that we look into setbacks, staff suggestions, whatever those might be, buffers, screening from roads, floodplain, any sort of floodplain determination, whatever you guys want to do with that, and then scale, which we believe was covered by the definition. That's what was advised for us last month.
Right.
I'm hearing hours of operations is possibly the next addition to that.
lot size and hours of operation. And what have you. We're not going to do required setbacks. Don't think that's necessary. That's just a case by case.
A buffer.
Yes.
Got that
Buffers,
on there, but that's different, isn't than setback.
vegetative buffer.
Said you do want to see lot size because last month we had
Kind of nix that,
not doing lot size.
right?
You don't want to do lot size?
Well, I mean, last month we talked about not doing it. I'd like to have some input from you guys, what you think. And we kind of we said, there may be a 3-acre parcel that's perfect for it, or there may be a 10-acre parcel that's not perfect for, do we want to have a minimum lot size for a wood yard?
I think buffering is gonna be more important than lot size.
Yeah.
Put a buffer around it, plant a buffer around it, and not, and like we're just discussing, but setbacks don't necessarily fall into this because it's not a building.
Yeah.
It's not a structure. You're piling logs in there. It's not any different than piling logs in there than it is piling ground bale hay up against a fence line.
Mm.
To some people, so.
It sounded like Board of Supervisors wanted us to have a lot size in there.
I believe they just wanted you to consider it. And if you decided after giving that further thought and discussion, if you decide you don't recommend it, I think they'll be okay with that.
Lot size.
I think we considered it.
Any of those
I mean, because
points.
the facility design, how somebody lays out the thing is, it's going to determine whether a 3-acre parcel is going to be sufficient or whether they need 10, so I'm okay with
It's
leaving
by
that.
special exception, if it's 3-acre works or 10-acre works.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're taking lot size off. We
Take lot size off.
Don't want to deal with
Okay.
that.
Hours of operation,
Yes.
I think we need to address that.
We're not letting people get married after 11 o'clock, so we shouldn't be operating after 10 o'clock.
There you
Like,
go.
with a
That's right.
Backup alarm, let everybody sleep at night.
Right.
So
Um,
6 a.m. to 10, so.
Vegetative buffers,
And I don't mean to add more, but through my research, I did come across, and I don't know who it was, but noise was a concern. And I think it was Albemarle restricts the hours of operation for the machinery. So I didn't know.
Which is, I think, what we're talking
6
about.
to 10, 6 a.m. to 10 at night.
We just been discussing noise for wedding event venues, so I didn't know
Yeah.
if noise for a wood yard is.
Yeah, I think that's why we're talking about
think we-
hours of operation
that would
being
be, yeah.
Covers it, yeah.
6 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Summertime, you'll have people wanting to come in later on in the evening. So you can't say it, you're gonna cut them off at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, because in the summertime, they'll roll in there
Right
at
till it's
8,
dark.
9:30 at night, because it's still light. Let the guys work when they can, they've got to work when it's dry, especially log side.
Would
And
not,
a lot of, I'm sitting out here and I'm looking and I see a ton of people out here that are in the logging business and all logs. And I know a ton of them personally. And it's big in this county. There's a lot of logs get cut in this county, a lot of logs get hauled in this county. And it's good
business.
revenue for the landowners in this county. So definitely, I don't want to see us kick this thing to the curb. Let's make it where we can
Right.
make it doable and something that can be lived with.
We also talked about days of the
Is
week,
9 o'clock a reasonable hour? It's just as a,
10 o'clock.
I'm saying 10.
you're saying
You
10,
want to say
6
6 a.m.?
a.m. to 10.
6 a.m. to 10?
Rooster's up, it's time to get up and go.
Okay. Yes, if you can keep your comments reasonable, yes. And you'll need to come on up. And can you get it done in 3 minutes?
Who's got a timer?
I'm Tim Goodbar, and I'm a resident of Cars Creek District. And I don't live too awful far away from this piece of property, our discussion. Robert was talking about, y'all been discussing the time that we need to come in. There is conditions, and it's not every day, and it's not a lot of times real regular, that we have breakdowns in the woods, and we don't get there before 10, 11 o'clock at night to unload. And I'd like for you to take that into consideration, that instead of setting a hardened time, give us a little bit of leeway with this thing. And I'm very familiar with this piece of property, and it can be engineered where water does not enter that property.
We actually have to consider all wood yards at this point.
I understand
And
that.
again,
And-
we don't want the tail wagging the dog, but we
But-
are keeping that always in the back of our
We've
mind.
got a fine line we got to go by at time. We all need to make money. We all need to make a living. If we don't make money, we're not going to make a living. And I guess what I'm asking you is to, and there's some other people here that probably get up and explain this a lot better than I do, because there's some sawmill operators here. I've been in on their yard before 12 o'clock at night and unloading myself because I was working 150 miles from their sawmill, and we couldn't be there at no 6 o'clock. We 9:30, 10, 11, 12, many times. We like to go in there. If we don't get there early enough in the evening, we like to go in 4 o'clock in the morning once in a while and unload so we can get out of Dodge. But when you're working local, you don't have to work like it.
Hours of
So, going back to what the board wanted us to address, I mean, the big thing, and, you know, we're focused on the whole ordinance, but obviously we're focusing on one piece of property too. You know, unfortunately, it's in the back of our minds, but if we want to put something about the 100-year floodplain, I like what Augusta has, and I think with some tweaking of the wording, it could be used, and we could give that to the board. Maybe that would satisfy them as far as, we're not saying no to this use in a floodplain. We're saying it can be mitigated or, and use the word with professional engineer, you know.
You're looking at.
Yeah, it's E. Yeah, that E.
E, yeah,
Which,
Augusta,
locality,
flood, the FDO on the,
construction,
right above
placement, or
Bedford.
storage?
I don't know if you would say if properly anchored. I mean, that leaves like every log has to be pinned to the ground somehow. Maybe say if placed or stored, some ways, some mitigation language. I don't know if that's
My whole thing
legally,
is
if
back
we
to a
can use
plan
that.
prepared by a professional engineer. I mean, you can't just decide this, you think this is gonna work.
you have to
gotta
say why they have to prepare that plan. I mean,
Right.
you're mitigating potential for logs to float away or, you know.
Flotation log.
Yeah.
Going back to the time thing, we also had talked about days of the week, and I think, I just can't remember, I think we had said, you know, they could do it on Sundays if it was like repairing, you know, mechanical things and, you know, whatever. We just need to go back and find that we started with a while back.
So, again, I think we have two, to my knowledge, we have two special exceptions, two commercial sawmills operating under special exception. The first one is condition number 2, operation of the log yard will be from 5:30 a.m. until 10:30 p.m. to include all cleanup activities. Log trucks can be loaded and unloaded 24 hours a day, 24 hours per day, 6 days a week. Sunday milling operations shall not be allowed, and no equipment shall be used on Sundays except for as needed for the following permitted activities. Number 1, maintenance of the property and repairs. Number 2, sawmill and equipment repairs, installation, maintenance, and improvements, including temporary and intermittent testing of equipment. And number 3, log grading and scaling, not to include sorting. Exterior activities that produce noise shall be limited to between the exterior activities that produce noise shall be limited between the hours of 12 noon and 4 p.m. Of course, that's pertaining to Sunday alone. The second operation that we have is number 1, second operation that I'm aware of operating under special exception is number 1, operate 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday between 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. And number 2, emergency repair work of equipment allowed on Sunday. Log trucks may be unloaded and loaded 24 hours a day, 6 days a week.
I think we need to be consistent with that.
Well, I'm still on the 10 o'clock. Because if you're gonna put in a log yard in an ag district, you might be close to some houses, you might have some neighbors floating around that want to go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, so. Sorry. Good bar.
Yeah, 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, that's a lot.
Yeah, but I mean, to me, you're looking at 6 to 10, 6 a.m., 10 p.m., Monday through Saturday, and Sundays is like a no-no kind of deal.
Agree.
in a log yard.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that just for like loading and unloading? So, could be trucks coming in from, like,
Oh, a truck comes in, that's different. Yeah.
and it's just operating now. Loading.
That run equipment's what's gonna get people up in there. You know how it is better than anybody, and both y'all do. Backup alarms, dust, chains rattling, trucks jaking, whatever's going on. I mean, if you keep the noise down to minimum, you keep the complaints down to a minimum. And that's what it'll all be about. You know,
Okay,
Sounds reasonable.
Can you further clarify exactly what you want between the hours of 6 and 10 o'clock? You want hours of operations, you want machinery only, unloading and versus loading trucks? How exactly do you want it?
hours of operation, 6 a.m., 10 p.m.
That's going to include loading
So
and trucking.
unloading, unloading trucks, whatever's going on. And
Trucks can come in.
And then, and it's
Park.
right.
Okay.
As long as not getting unloaded and loaded in the middle of the night. So Mr. Goodbar wants to park his truck in there at 12 o'clock at night, leave set till the next morning, let him unload it, come pick it up. Then that's all good because he can ride in there and shut it off, go on home. Which I don't think should cause any problems with anybody. I mean, we're looking, this is something we got to put a little thought into because it's just not for this one log yard. It's for any that may come in the county anywhere. It may be across from anybody's house in here or next to them.
Is that clarifying enough for you,
that
Chris?
help
Thank you very much,
Chris?
yes.
So I would encourage the operation of the log yard would be, what I'm hearing is 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. To include all cleanup activities, what's in the current one. And then number 3 is log trucks can be loaded and unloaded 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. That's what I'm hearing. You do not wish to pursue that one. And, but it needs, we have had concerns on one of these special exceptions of log trucks pulling in, not having a car to take you home and spending the night with the truck running, close proximity to someone else. So that's something to be considered, if you want to consider that. But of course, this allows for the log trucks to be unloaded and loaded 6 days a week. I think in that particular case, they were just waiting for the employees to come unload unload logs at, in this case, 5:30 a.m. And that would obviously be, well, it could be any time of the year.
How do you fix that? So,
I don't know how do you do that unless you're just consistent with the
no idle. I mean, that'd be the only thing you'd have. But no idle clause in it.
Mhm.
So you can't get that way anyway.
Address getting real into the weeds, in my opinion.
Get in the weeds, but we have complaints on it. We've had complaints on it before, so. Had to get
Better
it-
to deal with it up front.
Yeah,
And
better,
just, I mean,
exactly.
no, you're not gonna sit there and run the truck at 2 a.m. in the
The more
morning.
specific it is now, the less complaints and less problems we're gonna have later on down the road. Just don't wanna make it too restrictive.
and buffers too. So you have that.
So that let everybody have a field to operate.
Mr. Musa, what do you have that we've just,
So the major concerns that I have so far are the buffers, setbacks, flood hazard zone, and the hours of operations.
And didn't you guys decide against the setbacks because you figured the buffers are going to deal with that?
Sorry.
How, what kind of buffers, what kind of buffers, what?
we're looking at.
Vegetative buffer requirement.
vegetative buffers.
30 foot, 30 foot, 2 rows of trees, where you plan on, where we gonna put
Don't
in
you
there?
think that has to be, I mean, that is
That's
part of the
specific.
special exception. They've got to come to us with a plan.
Right.
And we're going to require it, but
We-
then they got to
we
come
should
with a
have some
plan.
kind of recommendation going into this thing, and, as far
I would
as the
recommend the double layer like. we
buffer
did.
goes, and then let, and then. we can
For
back
the
off.
buffering, we do have, on one of the, let me check the second one, the one of them, and it's, the former Shoemates American Hardwoods, formerly American Hardwoods. With that being said, it says 1 or 2 foot white pine seedlings that are planted and, maintained approximately 10 foot apart along State Route 623 for a distance of approximately 500 feet as needed to screen the log yard and lumber mill from dwellings located across the State Route 623. Where power lines are located, the upper story shrub, where power lines are located, use a lower story shrub up to the second entrance at the intersection of Maple Southward.
Yes, and that's a special, that's with that particular property.
Yes.
So now I do have like kind of a living ordinance, a draft ordinance, just kind of that I've been playing with. And I think what I have here for a buffer would be acceptable, kind of. So I'll just read it for you. It's a wood yard shall include a landscaping buffer of a single row of native trees or shrubs along any adjacent public road located within 100 feet of the wood yard. These plantings shall be a minimum of 3 feet in height at planting and a minimum of 6 feet in height at maturity. The space between each planting shall be no less than 2 feet. Additional vegetative buffers and requirements may be prescribed by the planning commission or board of supervisors as needed. And I think this is ripped either from Albemarle or something local. Yeah.
I think that's.
The only concern I would have on that one, if I heard it correctly, is the minimum spacing, because obviously if you're dealing with white pines, it's one thing. If you're dealing with Leland cypresses, it's another. I would say space, could say spaced accordingly per landscape architecture, standard plantings or something. But for beneficial, for time consideration, I think we should flush out each one of these ideas. We are definitely bouncing around. So I think we should just nail down one and move to the other one. Because the goal here is to take this, I think the goal here is to take something to public hearing in December, and so we have all the time in the world this evening. But with that being said, to facilitate the conversation, I do think it'd be beneficial for everybody to deal with one thing at a time, get that done, and then go to the next.
That's why I wanted Mr. Michaud to
So we've
Read
dealt
that.
with the buffer, we've dealt with the time.
Well, we
Operation.
haven't fully dealt with the time. What I have on the time is operation of the log yard will be from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. And that's what I have. And so that I am concerned as the zoning administrator, what the operation of the log yard is. Does that include someone idling on the property? Would that be construed as operation of the log yard? It very well could be problematic. With that being said, you could add something to the fact that log trucks may be stored on site during close of business, but I don't know what, not to idle or not to be idling. But I would like, I do think there needs to be some directives, one at one time, then let's go to the buffer, see what that is. Let's go to the floodplain, see what that is.
let's take the time of operation.
Want to say something?
They need to.
It's cold. They need. I don't see where that would truck out.
I think if it were a situation where there were a site that was near, then we might have to put that in
A condition.
a condition for that
Special.
particular yard. But I don't think that needs to be part of the general.
Well, I think it does. I respectfully disagree, because if it says hours of operation of the log yard will be from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., we're going to have a conflict. If someone's sitting there.
Idling is considered operating, you're not unloading and loading and, they're just sitting.
Moving.
Depends on what your neighbor says, Seth. That. Right, but what I'm saying is, we're sitting here and this is gonna be for moving forward for establishing log yards in an ag district. So as you're moving forward, you gotta look at and we've got to look at every possible scenario, because you may have really good neighbors that are around you that don't care, that are happy that the log yard's there and they're thrilled because you're throwing them some firewood across the fence. And you may have somebody sitting there like the gentleman that lives across from Augusta Lumber right there, that every time a stick made a noise on a Sunday, he had the sheriff's department right there. So you can look at each site individually. So yes. So you go in and you lay a set of rules down now, and you can go in with some special exceptions.
That's
To
why I
me,
think we're
it's a-
trying to be more broad.
To me, it's a 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. operations. And if we get to the point we've got to deal with trucks idling, we'll have to deal with trucks idling.
Well, I would encourage you just to put it in here now. And I agree with you that the operation is the loaders and unloaders, but to make my job and the next guy or girl's job easier, you might as well spell it out here and say, guess what? It's very explicitly clear in here that it's log trucks idling on the property is not part of our operation. To to avoid.
Maybe that's what
potential-
you say is log.
To not,
To avoid potential conflict, you know,
Okay,
so it's
well,
here
that's
and there's
fine.
no room for
Idle-
Say it
interpretation.
is not, that
We're
is
not
not
sitting in front of
considered
board of zoning
operation as
appeals.
far as I'm
consider
concerned.
operating, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense because that'll let them
Trucks
out.
idling on the
Right.
log yard are not considered.
And we're not gonna make them, we're not gonna make them cut these off. It's going, if the verbiage is gonna be,
That's exactly what we're trying to avoid.
verbiage is gonna be trucks idling are not a part of operating, of the operating hours. So it's gonna be, it'll give you that 8 hour window for somebody to sit there if they need to.
I was gonna say, it's gonna
Yeah.
be better
Yeah,
being on the
better-
highway.
better.
How many accidents happen that way? Ugh. So are we good with the time and the clarification, Chris?
I believe so. So what I have, and correct me, operation of the log yard will be from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Log trucks idling on site are not considered part of log trucks idling on site are not considered as operation of the log yard. And I'm gonna play with this, obviously, but
Right.
I want to
No,
be
that's
clear
good.
with the intent, so we're clear
Mhm.
and there's no surprises to anyone come December.
No, it's all good.
Next one that well, you have on your list.
So we've done the buffer and we've done the hours. I think that all we've got left is the floodplain.
I think
Well,
If-
if we, do we want to put something about setbacks in there if it's adjoining a residential type piece of property on either side? That's the only time I could see a setback would fall into play, because if you go in and, let's just say C.S. Fitzgerald wants to go down on his property on 11 and put in a log yard, and there's nobody around him, that's fine. There's
But how
not a
about the
set,
one we just, put in ag and they're surrounded by R1 people?
there's not a setback for him on his property because he owns it. It's residential all the way, not residential, ag all the way around it. Anybody that moves in there after the fact's gonna know it's there.
Right,
So if they decide they're gonna build a house right next to it,
that's on them.
that's on them. But it'll protect the people that are already existing in place, just like we're doing with the vineyard and everything else, and that's what it boils down to. So do we want to put some setbacks on
100-foot
it?
setback? Is that enough?
If it's adjoining a residential neighborhood or residential,
That's what I
homes.
read in here. Most of them were 100-foot setback.
if it's ag around it, let it go.
If it's ag around it, you really don't need 100-foot setback.
Right, you don't,
I'd
you
say
won't need it, you don't need setback. One thing you got's your screen, which is,
If there's a residence, right,
If it's adjacent,
existing resident, then there needs to be a setback. If there's an existing residential.
residence.
you think, Chris, I know you've read
residential
these,
structure.
the 100, I mean, should we put, we were talking about putting in for, between, if it's up against a residential adjacent to that there should be a 100-foot setback? or-
Would you be open to a setback from a neighboring structure or dwelling? If within,
Residential dwelling.
cannot be within 500 feet of
Residential.
a structure or dwelling on an opposing property, not on the
I'll say
same parcel of the wood.
I wouldn't say,
I'm not gonna say 500, no,
Or whatever, I just use that as a.
if I buy a 10-acre tract of land to put a log yard on, and I'm gonna be required to have a 50-foot or 100-foot buffer between my operations and my property line because there's a house adjacent to it. It's just having a setback internal where I've got a setback in there with buffering in place, grass, trees, whatever in place to keep it off of this guy
What if
over
the
here. Who's got his
what if the
res-
residents in the adjoining properties
300 feet, 400 feet.
Well, then that's something we can address. If it's 300 or 400 feet away, there's not gonna be an issue with it. But if it's sitting next door to it, if it's sitting 50 feet off the property line, then we won't, and somebody
We
want to
need
put
to
in,
have some more.
need to have some verbiage in there for a buffer.
Residential dwelling within.
Yeah, I think we need to
100
say
100
residential
feet of
dwelling.
the-
It's not gonna be a barn
It's
or a,
offset, 50
you
foot on a
know,
house
garage.
down on the property line.
For a single family dwelling in an agricultural zone, yes, it's a 50-foot rear. It's a 50-foot rear and a 50-foot side.
If it's
Yard
anything,
setback.
anything
On the property line.
yeah, from the
From
property.
the property line, yes, sir.
I mean, it's just a thought.
Chris, you're over there just writing away. Does that mean you have some verbiage you want to share?
I no, I think I'm just making sure I want to make sure we're on the same plane, but if there's something you want to share.
I was just gonna mention that what you can do is include a minimum setback that would be applicable in all cases, with the ability to set additional setbacks if circumstances warrant it under the special exception permit.
That works.
25 feet.
I think it should be 50 because it's 50 on every other residential from the line, so 50 feet, minimum of 50
About
foot
logs that
setback.
come and go. You know, I use the example of hay bales. If I want to suck hay bales right up to my property line, I can. And it's an ag and forestry use. So I think it's a little overly restrictive. I mean, it probably won't ever come into play. I mean, bigger parcels, you can pull your logs or your hay further away, but I mean,
So
like the
so my
supplement said,
question
I
is, so
think we can-
you're okay with putting the logs right up against the fence and the house is 50 feet away?
again, I think that's handled under the special exception. If you say a minimum of 25 and somebody comes in specifically and there's an opposing neighbor, then you handle it under that individual permit.
50 feet from here to the wall.
A little further.
A little further. All right. Wall to wall, 50 feet.
To move it forward, yeah, that's fine.
What's that? I'm actually unplugged now. If the planning commission wants me to, I can certainly take that. Now, ironically enough, I said this at the October meeting. I told the chairman at the October meeting, let's not get into details of the particular site.
Yeah.
By the
we're-
hour
we're
and a half
not-
later, we
Right.
had the
Yeah.
site on
Yeah,
there measuring things and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I'm not discussing that particular site. I think we need to discuss
Not up against
setbacks
residential.
for, if it's an ag,
It's up against a residential
if it's ag against an R1, I think there needs to be a
minimum.
If it's
setback.
ag against R1,
Yes.
there's buffer requirements already.
Not
I
all
don't
in
foresee
one.
this use going next to a residential zone piece of property. I mean,
So-
there might be some
So
unusual
are
ones
we-
out.
Gail Milam and her property, 100 acres, if she decides she wants to put a wood yard and it's surrounded by R1, you don't think that could happen?
I was about to say that the only unique one would be the Poplar Hill area. I mean, most of our residential zoning districts is about 1.2% of Rockbridge County, and
Yeah.
primarily there at outside of the city of Lexington, outside of Buena Vista, Glasgow, Goshen. Of course, we have a large swath in the Poplar Hill area, but most of those, some of the landowners through this process didn't realize they were even in a residential area.
Right.
And so no, I've said it from the beginning. There's only so many road networks that this is going to be appropriate use on. I mean, we get phone calls all the time about, hey, the log truck that, whatever, has been on the road for a while. What gives? Well, that's you got a big piece of property. You're logging the property for X number of months, X number, whatever it may be, but that use goes away. And so I've expressed this to at least Chairman McLaughlin, I could see it on 60, 850, 251. I could see it on Route 11 potentially. But as far as going down Wesley Chapel Road or Poplar Hill or Walker's Creek or, wherever, Bill, on a rural secondary road, I would not see it being very conducive because of the traffic pattern.
I think the bigger concern that we need to be thinking about here is not the current houses that are there and putting a wood yard next to a house, but putting a wood yard next to a piece of land that could have a house.
I'm not worried about the guy that could have a house, because when he comes in and builds his house, He's gonna know the log yard's already there.
But you've effectively killed his land value by putting a wood yard
Right there.
25 feet right next to his property line.
I mean, obviously, 10 yards is 30 feet, 10 yards, y'all know where that is.
So nobody's building a
With
house.
that being said, I agree with Mr. Busso. You're not really planning on what's there now. You have to also consider the people that bought land and are planning to build a house and then a wood yard that's potentially next to them. By special exception, I understand, but I would not, it would be unusual for us to say existing dwellings. I think all our setbacks go from property lines. Now you're dealing with livestock confinement facilities. That's a whole different ballgame. They are from existing dwellings and property lines and roads and everything else. And of course, that's a very major use for an agricultural area as well. Livestock confinement, poultry houses, turkey houses, that type of thing.
Well, if this is used by special exception and I've bought a piece of property and I'm planning on building a house, and the guy next door decides he wants to put a log yard in, I'm gonna be the guy standing up here that's gonna be raising the devil about a log yard coming in because I don't want it next to my property I'm gonna build a house on. And I don't think I'll probably be the only person there doing that if it got to that point.
Depending on the lot size.
Depending on the lot size. I mean, and I look at this thing and I'm wanting to protect the person that's already got a house there as maybe as much as the guy that's going to build a house because he's already got a house there. And somebody's want to come in and put a log yard, just like the Weatherlys in their venue they're putting in. Everybody on Henry Hill already had a house there. We had to limit him and limit them on what they could do. And that's the same thing we're wanting to do here, is make sure we cover our bases and take care of the people that are already there.
I think my point was, I think you can do both of those things. You can cover both of those scenarios with a flat buffer that takes into account both of those
Which
situations.
is, I think, what we were trying to do.
That's
but
what we were
Chris
trying
was
to do.
saying that
They wasn't
he
just,
didn't think that was necessary because there already is.
A buffer
But
requirement
buffer.
between an agricultural zone and a residential, a bona fide residential zone, which is again, is a very
That's-
small
that-
portion of the
that-
town.
but I'm talking ag to ag, not ag to residential.
Sure, that's
The odds,
exactly. yes.
the odds of somebody coming in wanting to put a log yard next to a residential development, there's gonna be enough people around raising the devil, that won't ever fly. And anybody that's wanting to do it's not gonna jump in and go, yeah, I wanna go do that because that's like suicide on a suicide mission. To me, it would be if I was getting ready to put in a log yard, I wouldn't fight that battle. I'd go on off someplace else and find a piece of property.
What's so interesting is this all started because we didn't want to put all these parameters on things. We wanted to take each site and look at it, and it's a special exception, and we're going to look at each one. And now all of a sudden, here we are talking about all these parameters because Board of Supervisors says we need to put more things in there. So maybe
Well-
we're getting in the weeds here a little bit.
Well, we're getting in the weeds a little bit, but we've got to look at what's going to happen in the future. This isn't just for the
I'm just
one
saying, I don't
site.
think we can plan for everything that might happen. That's why it is a special exception. We look at each property.
Well, any way you go about this thing, a 50-foot buffer around the outside of it's not, it to me is more than
Right.
reasonable because
I
I
agree.
don't have a problem with logs up against the fence, but I know what happens in a log yard, as does everybody else around here. It's a dust bowl. And it'll be a dust bowl and there'll be dust coming across the fence and dust coming over into the neighbors next door in their house with on their Corvette or whatever they got sitting there that.
That's
Or
just the storage of them.
So
They could have,
that's-
they could have
That's why
roadway with that would,
a buffer would be a 50-foot unused buffer with
Unused
trees,
buffers.
grass,
okay.
whatever you want
Right,
to let it
that's-
grow,
that's
mile
where I
olives,
wanna go with
multiple rose bushes, whatever they want to let it come up in. That makes sense to me.
I
as
mean,
far as
based
buffer
on,
goes.
I'll just go ahead and say, based on some solar projects that we've recently done, and 3 months later, we have this very extreme buffer from Route 11, from a public highway from Route 11. We have extreme buffers from adjacent sawmill on one side. We have buffers against the interstate. I don't think it's over onerous to start talking about buffers. And that's one thing that y'all directed us to do in the solar ordinance. Well, as far as a passive use of land, you got a log yard here and a solar field here. As far as the passive use, obviously the solar field is much more passive use of property than a log yard. Do you not agree?
So the solar thing, I've never gotten over that just because I just know what it's gonna look like and I hate it. And so, yeah, I want a lot of buffer because I don't like people coming into Rockbridge County and seeing a big old bunch of metal sitting there. I just think that's totally different. It just, it's just my opinion, but it's just totally different than what a log yard is, which is an agricultural.
No noise, truck traffic, dust. And lighting, if you had any lighting, that's gonna be your complaints. That you're gonna get from anybody that's around it. That's gonna be what it'll be. We just gotta cover that.
Make it easy, lighting is covered by the existing land development regulations.
Correct.
We can check that one off the list.
So are we adding the minimum 50-foot setback then?
I've got a minimum of 50-foot setback for wood yards. And then I hate to stretch this out any further, but we kind of, I think we're shuffling words together, buffer setbacks. Just to be clear, we're okay with no vegetative buffer, landscaping buffer between property lines.
Yeah, we did say we wanted a buffer because you had some specific language about that vegetative buffer was
native
gonna
trees.
be
I thought the buffer
certain
was
trees
along,
and.
was along roads.
Roads.
Yeah.
Specifically just roads. but
Right.
Property lines.
Property lines mean as much to me as a road does, so. Because the guy next door with the house with the car and the pool, whatever.
So do you want a vegetative buffer on those as well? Not just a 50-foot setback?
Thank you. That's so.
And the Dominion Power, Vepco, Virginia Power, whoever put the subdivision in, just say the Fairfield, they put cedar trees in there. And I looked at those things and I said, it'll take them forever to get any size to them. And that's as good a buffer as you can get right there on that. I think you cannot see anything inside of that. And they're tall enough now, and they planted them up on top of some berms they had there, and I said, they'll all die. And every one of them lived. They did a good job. And that's a native species that.
So to facilitate the discussion again, we could certainly utilize the existing language in our landscaping ordinance pertaining to buffer requirements.
Great. We need to reinvent the wheel.
So then are we at the last thing, which is if it's in a floodplain, we're going to require the following. One, an engineered design of plan, an engineered
Plan
plan.
to prevent
The logs on the.
Keep the logs on the property
logs on the
in
property.
the event of a flood.
Well, and we do have a lot of examples in the package that, again, no reason to reinvent the wheel, but if y'all want to look at these, we went over one example we gave was Augusta. The first one says the following structures and uses are prohibited in the floodplain district: landfills, junkyards, outdoor storage of vehicles or materials. Then the keeping of recreational vehicles, we're not talking about that. Utility sheds, that's already covered in the building code. And then the construction, E would be the construction, placement, of storage of any object subject to flotation or movement during flooding. Such items may be constructed and placed or stored if properly anchored in accordance with the plan prepared by a professional engineer and approved by the county engineer. Again, obviously, we do not have a county
I
engineer.
think we talked about taking out the word anchored because we're not gonna, anchor down.
Good.
I think just placed or stored in accordance with a plan prepared by a professional engineer. Are they gonna really anchor down every piece of tendon?
The only way I see you pile it up.
That's what, evidently, that's what the requirement in Augusta is. That could certainly be modified to say properly secured on site in accordance with a plan prepared by a professional engineer. And that would piggyback on some of the ideas we talked about on this
I like
particular
that.
site, as far as
Placed
properly
or stored
Secured.
and properly.
secured.
Secure.
So it would
Got
say
that,
such
Mr. Russo?
objects may be constructed, placed or stored
I think I
and
got it.
properly secured.
You got it. Okay.
That was probably meant more for not necessarily for logs, but for other things that floated.
Thanks.
Tanks and, yeah.
And I wanted to reach out to the zoning administrator because I'm not sure if this is in conflict or whether there's a hierarchy, because obviously A is landfill, junkyards, and outdoor storage of vehicles or materials is prohibited in all flood zones in Augusta. And so then I'm not sure the hierarchy of it with the E of what we're discussing, but that's here nor there per this discussion.
All right, do you have enough? We're not making any motions tonight, are we?
I would like a motion. I mean, depending on the time frame, we've definitely pulled Mr. Beverly and company along for a couple months.
Yeah.
And I'm fully,
So the
fully
motion-
supportive of that, but it would be, you know, this is the time. We could do two things to answer your question directly. We could then prepare a draft ordinance for your consideration at the December meeting and have discussion at that time, or we could fully vet it out now, or I don't want to say trust staff, because I know y'all do, but to bring something back for public hearing. And I don't think that's unachievable. I mean, we got a lot going on as always, but.
Do you want to have some kind of a draft drawn up and let the board look at it and go, yeah? Or let them kick it back and instead of before the next meeting?
Because
And
if
then we
we,
can,
if we take it to the next meeting and the board kicks it back to us again,
Well, these additions, do they require another public hearing?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So we're specific.
Yes.
it would like.
We held a public hearing on the draft ordinance we have now. Of course, we know the history of that, and so it requires any alterations that are more stringent require the re-advertising of the public hearing.
we need to do something tonight and get this back.
Let's
Get this-
Yeah,
get this
I'd like to take it to
done.
public hearing.
So we take it to public hearing.
Okay,
So what we could do is we could work on this, we could work on the ordinance and then email it out to y'all for review individuals, get individual feedback from the planning commission, and then take it to public hearing during the month. I also, of course, I said that at the October meeting that we, probably next week, we can get you the information on other localities. Of course, you got that in your package, you know, and so it is time sensitive.
yeah, well, I'd like to put this.
And I
puppy to
completely
bed.
understand and respect that Crown Hardwoods need to get it going.
Yep. This needs to be done. So
He does. All right, so let's trust staff to get the verbiage to us, but we would like to take it to public hearing in the December meeting.
And I'll have to work on if this is I think some of this is going to be pertaining to a log yard ordinance. And I think some of it's going to be in the landscaping ordinance and potentially some of it in the flood ordinance, I think.
if
It
we
would be appropriate sections. So it's a lot of work. I mean, it's well worth it, obviously, but it's a lot to put together in a relatively short time frame.
Yes.
we want to do log and pulpwood yard, not just log yard.
I think pulpwood, per our current definition, I think pulpwood would be included.
Okay, just want to make
in
sure, because that's somebody, we don't want to have to go back and try to go over this again. Let's cover that base.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do now. That's
Wood
what
yard,
we
it
do.
is wood yard.
They call it wood yard,
Pulpwood.
but log yard, wood yard, we just want to make sure that that's covered.
Wood
I
yard.
think it is.
All right,
Make a
We
motion
good?
to adjourn.
Nope, not quite yet.
Oh, wow, we got another
Are we
35
going
minutes yet.
public hearing
If-
next month?
That's the current plan, so we need a motion.
Get
to
a
that
motion.
effect.
we need to have a motion for that.
Okay, I make a motion that we put what? What are we doing?
To direct staff to take the following items for public hearing at the December meeting. And the following items would include hours of operation as discussed, buffer requirements of discussed, with landscaping, buffer requirements as discussed, and then the floodplain as discussed. And so I know we're about to adjourn here in 2.5 minutes, but to reiterate what the board did, the board approved a motion. This is verbatim what they did. The board approved a motion to refer the zoning text amendments for wood yards back to the planning commission for further considerations of the 100-year floodplain taken care of, minimum lot size. We said we're not, we don't think that's warranted. Buffer requirements is taken care of, and scale of operation. We think scale of operation is currently covered in the modified definition.
Can the motion just be that we add to the public, that we ask staff to put, I guess, an advertisement for a public hearing for next month?
Yes, ma'am. You would instruct staff to take these proposed zoning text amendments to public hearing at the December meeting, and the ones that we.
I'm instructing staff to please.
Motion two.
I'm making a motion that staff will take to public hearing these draft amendments for the hours of operation, the buffers, the floodplain, and the setbacks.
Favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
This has got to come back here for another public hearing before it goes back to Board of Supervisors again.
Yes, ma'am.
And that won't happen until January.
No, potentially,
Probably January, because we don't usually have the second meeting in December.
so looking at the calendar, yes, we usually do not have, and we talked about that, but it'd be December 8th Planning Commission. It would be unusual, but we could potentially do a December 13th board. Do you think that's too tight of a time frame? I mean, we could advertise accordingly.
That could work.
And they don't have to
that's
have-
what we've talked about.
They
as
don't
far
have
as
to have
Mr.
another
Beverly
public
goes.
hearing, and they don't have to have a public hearing at Board of Supervisors,
Oh,
but they did.
Yes.
But they can still vote on it that night.
They can vote on it that night.
Okay.
All right. Motion.
Okay.
And of
make a
course, I will keep the board apprised of what we're doing as
We're thinking.
always.
Okay.
Do my best to.
All right. I will make a motion that we adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah,